just to start off, I will say that it's important to note that narcissism, right, is a description. Okay, so if I'm using the term, it's not a clinical diagnosis. It is simply the same as calling someone arrogant or stubborn. Narcissism is a description of a type of person. I just wanted to make that clear. So when I go through the different types that that I've stated, or that I will state, it's important not to latch onto one and then use it against someone. You know, this is simply to educate yourselves in understanding it better, understanding the different types, and maybe spotting the ones that you've kind of dealt with most, that you've experienced through your life, whether it be with parents, in relationships, with siblings, with friends, or with colleagues. So yeah, I just wanted to make that clear. Also, with so it's different as well to narcissistic personality disorder. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about, but that's the clinical diagnosis. That's where someone actually has to go in and, I guess, you know, tick the boxes to make sure that they're that. And there's not. The funny thing is, right, that with narcissistic personality disorder, this is my own personal belief, my own personal opinion now, that you don't get many people diagnosed with it because how many narcissists actually admit to having narcissism or actually having a problem? So if they cannot admit to things, the likelihood of them going in and getting diagnosed for it is slim to none. Um, from what I know, the ones that do get diagnosed for it are usually forced through incarceration. So if they did something criminally wrong, that's when they're forced to go see a psychologist or a psychotherapist, and that's when they get diagnosed. Otherwise, it's easily not kind of caught in the net of society, which is unfortunate, but it kind of comes with the condition, right? The fact that they can't take accountability, can't take any blame, and will constantly shift it to other people. And it's also another unfortunate thing that narcissism gets used an awful lot. The term narcissism, or people are called narcissists or narcissistic a lot, usually because the narcissists also use that as a term to shift blame away from themselves and to shift it onto the victims instead. And that's why we hear it a lot in society, and that's why a lot of people just simply dismiss it, because it is used by the perpetrators as much as it's used by the victims, and that can cause an awful lot of confusion. Right, so start off with the first one is probably the most common one. It's the one that we see mostly with celebrities and with people that are extremely charming, extremely witty, and that's grandiose narcissism. So, with grandiose narcissism, we'll normally attribute it to people that are quite successful, that are well put together, they're well dressed, they might be very arrogant, and they'd have a chronic need for validity. So the likes of celebrities or people that very much are all over like social media, like TikTok and stuff like that, and people that like to be on video, that like to have the attention on themselves, that like to show off a lot, that like to measure success through money and material items. Grandiose narcissism would definitely be the most common type. Now, with all types of narcissism. So I'm just going to go through a list. There's certain aspects that you'd see across all of them, and that will be limited empathy, validation seeking, arrogance, superficiality, and with grandiose narcissism, that's where we attribute narcissism the most. It's the most common one. Also, with that, you get super duper vain people, a lot of admiration seeking, and they might be sensitive to criticism, right? Yeah, so that's the most common one. Next up is so I have all of these written down, to be honest with you, because it's a lot. When I started to go through it, it was like, oh, like there's so many similarities, but there's also like there's subtle differences, so I had to kind of make it clear for myself. The next one is covert narcissism. So that's also called vulnerable narcissism. That's where you have that's where it can get confusing, because someone who is typically a covert narcissist would also seem like they have a lot of empathy. They actually might pretend to have a lot of empathy for other people. They hide that aspect of themselves where they don't, you know. So you might have, let's say, spiritual gurus, for instance. Might be certain spiritual gurus that will be covert narcissists. So they might portray themselves as being actually very empathetic, very caring, trying to heal other people, trying to show a lot of empathy, but actually behind it all, they don't really care. All they care about is the money, the attention, and trying to get as much of that attention as possible. They might show a vulnerable side. They might lack the appropriate social skills. They might be extremely moody. They might even show signs of being depressive. They might seem victimized. So that's one thing with the covert narcissist, is that they might actually portray themselves as being the ultimate victim. And that's simply just to get people in, to get that attention on them. They might be extremely irritable. They might show signs of anxiety, but at the same time, they be extremely antagonistic towards others. They hit another thing with covert narcissism is that I noticed anyway, is that when it comes to the ideas of other people, they might be very dismissive of it. They might only see themselves as having the answers. So they dismiss what other people or other experts might say very quickly, and they think they know better than everybody else. They don't like to take risks. They'll mock people who do take risks. They don't like watching other people succeed. They're never really satisfied with many things. They might complain about everything and see themselves as the victim when the world doesn't go their way. So also they be the type of people that would be a victim to their situation. Like the world has not noticed them, and they really play up on that. And they be super duper passive aggressive. Super passive aggressive and be extremely judgmental towards other people, what other people, especially if other people are achieving more than them. And I would also add on to that and say that they can also sabotage other people just to make themselves feel better, and be highly competitive as well. So that's the covert narcissist. The next one is that I would pick out, and I don't have anything written for, is the communal narcissist. So that's the type of person that would act extremely charitable, right? That will be seen in society as the giver, um, that's extremely helpful towards people, towards charities, shown as, yeah, they like to be seen as giving to other people, and that can throw people off. That completely throw people off. Like someone that is seen to or wants to be seen. It's like I remember seeing a picture on, I think it was Instagram a few weeks ago, right? And it was just an animation, and it was of someone, of a man giving, let's say, a homeless person money. I don't know if you've ever seen those ones, and taking a picture of themselves while they do it. So it's like wanting the attention to be charitable, of them being charitable towards other people, but it's just to get the attention themselves, and that can really throw people off. You know, like imagine like wanting to be seen as being charitable, but not really. Um, yeah, that can get people in. That can make, really make people vulnerable. That kind of falls into that trap, and then behind it all, they might treat that person that is with them or their family like terrible. Might treat them like shit. And it's important to know these different types. It is, because it can be easily drawn in by it. They're extremely charming. Like across all groups, they're extremely charming people. They know what to say, when to say it, and their whole objective is just to use the people around them, just to get what they want, and to benefit from them, and then to treat those people terribly to feed them. Um, that's the horrible thing about narcissism. Absolutely terrible. Like to absolutely use people just to move their own career, or um, to get what they want out of it, and will do anything for it, for you, or for themselves, not for you, for themselves. The last one is the malignant narcissist. So the malignant narcissist is generally, from what I've seen and what I've read about. I don't think I've experienced a malignant narcissist myself in my life. I've experienced, I think, all the other ones, but malignant one seems almost the worst. Or maybe I've seen parts of it. So malignant seems to be very similar to a psychopath, but apparently it's completely different in some aspects. Not completely, but it's the most kind of comparable to it. So let me see what I have written here. So with malignant narcissists, they're mostly exploitative, they're very manipulative, they're coercive, controlling, cruel, deceitful, aggressive. They like to lie regularly. They have extremely fragile egos, like I think all narcissists do. They take advantage of others through any means necessary. They will break laws, bully others. They like to have power. They're extremely insulting. They put their needs ahead of others. They're likely to abuse drugs, go shopping a lot, will gamble. They're intense and obsessive when it comes to pleasure, power, and money. Extremely money focused. They'll accuse others of what they do. They'll view the world from a lens of threat. They'll be strategic, unethical, calculated, and they're the best salespeople in the world. I think, to be honest, most narcissists are really good salespeople. Like, like the fact that they're all kind of hiding these masks, will hide behind it. One thing that I noticed about the malignant narcissist compared to the other types is that they are probably the most paranoid. Um, that seems to be the thing that really kind of makes them stand out compared to the other types. So they believe that everyone is out to get them, that the world is out to get them, simply because they do all that bad shit. So they think automatically that everybody else does. Um, so yeah, that's the main differences. So we went through malignant, grandiose was the first one, covert, communal, and malignant was the last one. Yeah, like it can be extremely tough, um, to deal with narcissism. Like unless you have actually been through it yourself, uh, you know, to try to explain that to people, to try to explain how you're made feel when you're in a relationship with someone like that is only really out for themselves. I seen something interesting like last week, and it was, it was like basically a love poem, right? And the word love was mentioned, I think, let's say 5 or 6 times. And when you swap the word love with the word use, it really brings home, um, what what people are dealing with when they're dealing with narcissism as a whole. It's like I instead of I love you, I use you. And it's an important thing to remember because many people are when they get with a narcissist and they go through the many cycles of it, of the love bombing, of the abuse, the changing, um, the discarding, stuff like that. Even when they're out of it, and hoovering, of course. Even when they leave that relationship, because of the trauma bond that was built up, it's very easy to think only of the love bombing phase and to think the best of the person. Especially people with a lot of empathy, they'll usually think of the best parts of a person and forget about all the worst parts. You kind of almost give people the benefit of the doubt, or especially if you were actually in love with that person, you only want to see the good parts. You only want to remember all the good parts. But when you're being constantly used by someone for their gain, for their pleasure of actually hurting you, it can be extremely confusing, and it can be an extremely painful process for anybody to go through. And for anyone that's going through that right now, like my heart is absolutely with you. It's not the easiest thing, and even when you're out of it, even when you're not there, like the pain comes up again, again and again and again, kind of hits you like a brick over and over again. And it's horrible to deal with anyone that causes someone so much hurt and calls people names, um, and will go through so much stuff just to make someone feel terrible about themselves. No one deserves that. Everyone deserves to be feeling loved, feeling secure, feeling safe, you know. And to put up with that, especially if it's like a long term thing, because sometimes as well, it's not just relationships; it's family, you know. For someone to put another human being through so much pain, I think it's callous. I think it's something that we should all, kind of read up on and learn to avoid. And the more knowledge that we share with other people, the more we educate ourselves in order to move away from that and in order to move towards something that is better. Because like I said before, if we're dealing with that all the time, it's essentially bullying, by the person that you trust the most, right? By your partner, by your parent, by your siblings, friends, and stuff like that. You're being bullied, and it's very hard to manifest the type of life that you want, the type of existence you want, if you're constantly around that. Because as well, you're being made crazy, right? By that behavior, and you're constantly second guessing yourself because you want to see the best in people, and you almost believe what you're being told by that person because you trust them. You built up a level of trust. So trying to manifest in that situation can be difficult. The best, obviously the best thing, I would say, is try to get out of that situation if you can. Even at that, even if you do, it doesn't mean that everything is going to be solved overnight. I think anyone that goes through a situation of constant abuse, whether it's verbal or whether it's emotional, psychological, or even physical, needs some sort of therapy afterwards to work through those issues. I'd be happy to recommend a therapist if anyone is going through it at this time or has just left a situation like that. I'd be very happy to recommend. There's a great therapist who's a friend of mine, who deals with narcissistic abuse, that I'd be happy to recommend. If you're interested in that, just send me a DM and I can recommend that person. I'll let them know first, and send their details to you or give them to you. If you're looking to manifest or learn to manifest the life that you truly desire, and truly deserve, because let's face it, no one deserves to be abused by a narcissist. No one deserves to be abused by anyone. And I will say that narcissism is way more common, way more common than it's given credit. And I think once you recognize narcissism within a relationship of any kind, then you start to notice it in other places. And what I would say is that, yeah, it's a tough thing to get through. It is a tough thing. It's extremely difficult for anyone to get through, but you learn a lot. You learn so much from it. You learn who you can trust and who you can't, and you get to see, let's say, you pick up on those red flags that you might have ignored before, and you start to see them in other people. And it's important to recognize, because if anyone in our life is treating us a certain way that doesn't involve respect, that is very demeaning, that's going to affect how we're feeling, and that's going to affect also the type of life that we're looking for, the type of life that we deserve. And it's hard enough to get all of our emotions, intact on our own, and all of our feelings together, and then to know where we're going. It's hard enough to do that when we're on our own, and doing that surrounded by people that are constantly kicking us when we're down doesn't make it any easier. It just adds to the stress of everything. So if you're looking for support to get out of a narcissistic relationship, I can recommend a therapist that can absolutely help. If you're looking to manifest the type of life that you really deserve, I do a course called the Abundant Mindset. It's absolutely amazing. It took me over a year to set everything up, to have it exactly how I wanted it to be. So if you're interested in that, I can put in the details in the comments, and you can find out more about that. So thank you for joining me today. I think from next week I'm looking to have maybe someone or a few people on a live video, if anyone would be interested in volunteering for that, and we can talk about different topics. I'm not sure exactly what this week's or next week's topic will be till midweek next week, but if you're interested in getting on one of these videos live, And it's also easier for me to talk about it when I'm talking to someone else, rather than just talking by myself. So, yeah, let me know. You can either let me know in a comment or send me a DM and we can talk about it. So, yeah, thank you for joining me today. And I hope you guys have an amazing week and you learned a bit from this. Okay, so that's it for me. Take care.